Hello, everybody. We're here with a one-time unofficial podcast. We got Sequoia here. I'm
Hello?
here. We're talking about Ong's Hat Complete, and we're just going to give you a little run through of like what we're releasing, what you can do with it, and maybe some suggestions on how to approach this because it's not overly complicated, but it's different.
Yeah, that's a
And
good way to put it.
yeah, some people may be like, "Huh? What are they doing?" So basically, like the short story is last year I wrote 28,000 words in a state of complete mental exhaustion after coming off of a couple of years of publishing a trilogy and a couple of major media projects that I was doing, BBC, Audible, and but yet I still had this project I wanted to get done, and I got it done. But boy, was I dragging ass when I got over the finish line. I was like, I fell over the finish line, and I basically couldn't look at it anymore. I just put it away, and I thought like maybe I'll never do anything with this now that the story's done and it's in print. What do I want to do with this? And then I was like, you know what I need to do is stop thinking about it. So I did. Like I put it out of my mind for almost a year. And then it just like started creeping around in my head again and like knocking on my head and going, hey, 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 you ever gonna finish me? Hey, hey, hey. And at that time, I was like, okay, maybe I want to do something a little more expanded, a little more interdisciplinary, which is what I tend to do, something with audio. And Sequoia popped into my head, and I said, you know what? Let me see what he's doing because I know you had concluded your podcast,
Yep.
and I was a big fan of the podcast, and I liked the audio work that you did in the podcast. So I'm like, this might be the guy, but let's see what he thinks. And like, we started talking, and we just like went, okay, yeah, let's do this. So we just hit it right off.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I was
Yeah.
kind of just like walking around the woods with my camera a lot at the time. I wasn't doing much. It was great.
Yeah, I spent the whole summer just like with my animals and with my farm and like just plants and animals, like no people,
Yeah.
like literally
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
almost no people. And like my hands in the dirt for like months, which is what I needed, you know.
Yeah,
I
likewise.
need to touch grass, as they say, and come back down. It's like, because I came off the back end of like COVID, 4 years of Trump, two major media projects, a trilogy, like which I did, like every 2 years I put another one out for like 6 years, and basically just like like worked myself into a state of mental and physical exhaustion, and at the same time keeping the farm up. Like the whole time I still do that. Somebody's got to feed those animals and keep those plants watered.
I'm still not convinced you're not like three people, dude.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not
Like,
convinced
I
either.
don't know how you do it.
I'm not convinced either. So yeah, so basically, it was really cool when we came together on this. I like almost gave a high 30,000 foot view of like this is what I'm thinking I want to do, and you went, I get it,
Yeah. Yeah,
which was really refreshing to not have to explain it 70 times and
yeah,
be like, this is what I want to do, and everybody's like, what? What are you doing? Like you're just like, oh, I get it. And you like the encouraging thing is other people I've shown it to now that we're out of beta, but I showed a couple people in beta. Everybody responded very positively to, oh yeah, I see what you're doing. Cool.
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So basically, if you don't mind, I will explain what we're doing. So I'm going to share my screen, and if I rush ahead and don't let you say something you want to say, just tell me.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so okay, do you see that?
Yes.
Cool. So this is the web page that I'm just finished with today. And basically you can see the cover and you can see coming next week at this time when we're talking, Um, we will release a version on Sendal, which I will go over, a version on Bandcamp, which I will go over and show you, and then there will be a Kindle ebook. Currently, I'm working with Audible to see if I can get a Kindle ebook Audible bundle done, and they want to talk more. So, like, I don't know if it'll be done by the time of release, but I do know the Kindle ebook is done. It's already up for pre-release, so people can at least get that.
Hmm.
And I will explain how that works if you want to just do that, because some people like to read on Kindle and they like to buy Kindle, so we're going to make that available. We will also make, if we can, an Audible ebook, which will go with the Kindle, but Amazon is, I think, pushing back a little bit on that. I haven't completely talked to them about why yet, but mostly I think it's going to be for length
Yeah.
because the audio segment of this multidisciplinary work is 14 and a half hours, which, as you can attest, we were both exhausted when we finished that part of it.
Absolutely.
I know
Absolutely.
you were frazzled, and I definitely was. So, um,
Yeah, and that was
yeah,
after
so
editing too, you know.
yeah, exactly. So, anyway, it couple different versions. We'll talk about what they are. So, the first version, the complete version, which is the one we recommend, is this one right here, which you'll buy on Sendowl, which you will see. It'll be linked from the page and through the Substack right there. Buy
Hmm.
now on Sendowl. And basically, what Sendowl will do is send you to this storefront where you will have three versions. And this is Stadio Numero. So, like, if you want to read that, go ahead. Still around. But this is the Ongsa Complete. And we'll talk about these three versions. So, this is the bundled version. This is a set of ebooks and all the audio in MP3 high resolution or high fidelity MP3 version. And you'll be able to download that for $29.99, 14 and a half hours of audio, 28,000 words of print. And you say, is it the same thing? No, it's not the same thing.
No.
So basically, when you download that, you will get a zip file. You will unzip that file, and you will get something that looks like this, which will unzip.
There we go.
Okay, cool. So you'll get something that unzips. It'll look something like this. It'll be a directory full of things, wonderful things. And what's in that directory. So each chapter is broken out in its own directory. Each chapter has the MP3 of that chapter, of us talking about the chapter. It has the chapter as an EPUB or a PDF. It's like both are included. They're the same thing, but I include them because some people prefer PDF and some people like EPUB. So you get both. And then you can look at the EPUB. We'll open that up. So there's a chapter. So you can read the chapter. And then after you read the chapter, go listen to the MP3, which comes with the chapter, which is not a recitation of the transcript of the chapter. It's actually another dimension of the chapter. So each chapter has a conversation about the chapter between Sequoia and I, where
Yes.
we go in depth. We actually talk a long time about this thing. So think of it like this. You read the chapter of the book, either in PDF or EPUB, whichever you prefer, and then you go listen to a podcast about the book, about that chapter. That's essentially how to explain it.
Yeah. And we should mention also that the with the soundtrack by the absolutely wonderful Polypores, aka Stephen James Buckley,
Yes.
uh, which is an added benefit that
Yeah, so
rules.
every chapter has soundtrack to it, and it's from Polypores. And so everything's broken out chapter by chapter in a directory. Got the credits. dedications, all kinds of things in there. And so that's what you will get if you buy the complete version. This one. Okay. So let's say that you don't want the audio. You only want to read it. Half the price. You can download that. You will download a zip file that will have a PDF and an EPUB of the entire booklet, which is 28,000 words. It's not broken out chapter by chapter. It's a single file booklet of PDF and a single file booklet of EPUB, just like a book that you can read on your Kindle and you can read on your whatever ebook reader you use or on your computer. Or if you want to only listen to the audio and not read the ebook, you can download that version, MP3 audio only. Again, half price. Now, this I've done this because some people prefer to read their ebooks on Kindle. So Ank's Hat Complete currently on Amazon for pre-order. By the time you watch this video, I'll probably release it so you can just go buy it and download it. But if you want to say read the ebook on your Kindle and you prefer Kindle format, then you can download and order it here. And then you can just get the audio here if you want to. So you can mix and match. I'm not tying you to any one format in any one vendor. So if you want the audio and the ebooks here, there they are. Ebook only here or on Kindle there. And audio only there, which you could do an MP3 for the audio and you could do Kindle for the ebook if you want to. Some people like Kindles because they have a Kindle device and it's easier for them to buy it through Amazon and download it to their Kindle device.
Hmm.
That's why it's in Amazon Kindle. There may be an audible.com version, which will also be on Amazon, but I'm still negotiating with them. I think it's about the length that they have an issue with, and so we'll find out about that.
Hmm. I wonder if they're just like, this isn't the same book.
Yeah, it might be that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might
Or they
be
might just
like,
be like, did you mean to upload this? It's
yeah,
not
or
the
they'll
same as
be
the book.
like, this
Who
is
knows?
28,000 words, and you just uploaded 14 hours. What's going
The
on?
math doesn't add up here.
The math doesn't add up. Yeah. So it could be any number of things. We might not be able to distribute through Audible,
Ah, they're
and
lost.
that's totally fine. Like because we have the MP3s that people can download. Anybody can use an MP3 player. If you don't have one, VLC is a good free one, really solid. Um, that's one, and there's like lots of MP3 players out there. I'm sure that you might have for your computer and for your device to listen to this on iPhone, like Android, whatever. So MP3 is a good generic universal format. So you can download that, and hopefully we can get it on Audible. But if not, not the end of the world.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah. So basically, I'm suggesting that you read a chapter and then listen to the commentary about the chapter for every chapter because that's how it's
I also
designed.
suggest that.
Yeah.
That's the right way to do it.
Yeah. That's how it was designed to be experienced. Notice I don't call the people that going to interact with this users, readers, listeners. I call them experiencers. And because this was an experience design, that's what this is. I want people to read a chapter, listen to the commentary about the chapter, maybe go back to the chapter and click through the links because every chapter is linked. And like, I put a lot of links, like anything I could think of that people might not know, I linked it.
And it's dense.
Yeah, and
There's
it's
a lot of
dense.
links to click.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so it's only 28,000 words, but it's like I wrote and wrote and wrote, and I did what I do, which is like I wrote something really big and then I just condensed it and condensed it and condensed it because I come from the Bukowski Hemingway school, which is saying less is more.
It's not a bad school.
And so I kind of blow it up first and like blah, just kind of spew it all out with like lots of words. And then I go back and look at it. I'm like, I don't need to say that. I don't need to say it in that many words. I need to like condense it and say it more precisely with less words.
Yeah.
I want to be precise and descriptive, but I don't want to be verbose.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I did do a lot of condensing work on it. So it's like 28,000 words, but it's 28,000 condensed, very dense words. Like, this is what happened. Here's all the concepts. Here's all the links to the concepts. And if you look at the end notes, like all the links, it's like usually like 3 pages of end notes with links.
And then our conversations are rambling and they they take the opposite tack. Well, not rambling, but
No, no, I
we
don't think it's
talk
rambling at all.
all
We unpack everything, I
yeah.
think.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Which I think helps
Context
some
and
people as well.
yeah, for sure.
Like some people are like, "Oh, this is a lot of information."
And there's just like a lot of just incidental stories that you told during those conversations, each of which are like 2 hours long that are like
Yeah.
just fascinating. And
And it didn't make it into the written version, so
yeah,
it's like there's all these asides,
yeah, yeah.
which
Just about,
basically the first version of this looked like a conversation that we had. Like it was
yeah,
like that. So it was like I was like trying to include everything, and like I went back and like edited it. I'm like I don't need to include everything in the print version,
right.
but then my brain said, but you need to include it. And
Yeah,
so I
yeah, yeah.
reached out to you because you were the obvious candidate. And I said, can I torture you for 14 and a half hours?
It was much longer than that, but it wasn't torture at all. I
No,
had such a
yeah.
blast doing this, man.
What did we like? Yeah, it was like, God, we spent a month doing this thing,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
longer,
Two
maybe
months.
like
It was
two
eight
months. Yeah, yeah.
chapters. Yeah, just week by week.
Wow.
Yep,
So yeah, if you wonder why it's 29.99, well, a lot of time went into this.
for sure. For sure.
So I
Time well
put
spent
a
too.
couple of months into the written version, and then we put a couple of months into the audio version. So yeah, there's an incredible amount of time that was sunk into this, but I think it's important because it comes at a time I consider to be crucial, which is we're at a crossroads as a species where we went through a period of time where we were overly enchanted, I think, and then we had the Enlightenment, and the Enlightenment was a balance to the over enchantment, and then we discarded enchantment completely, and then we became materialistic and left brain as hell, like we just like went overboard with that because it's what we do, and we just can't. We're coming out of that now. And I'm hoping what we can do is we can step up and go, okay, now let's take what we've learned from those two extremes and forge a middle path of don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Enlightenment is important, but enchantment is important as well.
Hmm.
And I think we've discarded too much of enchantment right now. Like we're on the precipice of doing a lot of stupid things as a species, and it's because we've forgotten enchantment. We've
Yeah,
disenchanted the world.
yeah. We've forgotten the kind of the yin side of our apprehension of reality, the receptor where it's about control and analysis rather
Yep.
than, understanding and wisdom, right?
Yep.
The inexplicable, the imaginal, like that shit deserves a place at the table if we're to survive this next period. Uh,
Yeah.
so I see it at least.
Well, we have completely forgotten. We've convinced ourselves that we can subdue nature. If you can think of a crazier thing to convince yourself of, but we have convinced ourselves of that. Like as a whole, I'm not saying all of us,
Right.
but luckily what I'm seeing is this grassroots level movement where people are stepping back and going, no, I'm sorry, but I'm going to keep my enchantment. In fact, I'm going to amp it up a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm going to go in the
Yeah.
woods and I'm going to talk to the Fae because they're still there. It's just that they receded because we stopped talking to them and we disenchanted the world. So like they didn't go away, we stopped seeing them. That's what happened. And we if we don't acknowledge them, we think they don't exist. That's what disenchantment means. Like the world is no longer enchanted for us, for most people. So that's why I take people out in the woods and dump them off with a jug of water and a tarp and say I'll be back in 4 days. I'm lying. I'm actually close by. I know where you are. My job is to make sure you don't die, but nothing else. But like you're gonna sit here until something happens. 4 days. And if nothing happens in 4 days, it happens every once in a while. I get somebody that in 4 days they sit it out. They do the 4 days and then they come back to camp and I'm like warm them up and give them coffee and food. And they're like nothing happened. It's like, wow, that's too bad.
Yeah.
What's it take, man? What's going on with you? So, like, how do you like? I'm doing all the talking, so tell me how you feel about all this.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think that there's also, there's there's the spooky AI component of what you were just saying too. Like, not only have we disenchanted things, but we're also reaching a place where, um, I was just talking with my friends about this yesterday. Like, um, there's with like the rise of LLMs and chatbots and stuff, like
Hmm.
working with those things gets really spooky in not a computer-like way, if you spend any amount of time with them. And
Yeah, yeah.
people are unprepared for that. They're not ready for that type of experience when it will get spooky for them, and it will. And like that's I think like a very immediate and increasing danger of this type of disenchantment and this type of over reliance on left brain thinking is, yeah, we're not prepared for then what the fruits of our left brain thinking has given us, which is something like much spookier than we were prepared for, much weirder than we were prepared for. Just
Well,
in
and I
terms of
think I
how it
think
completes a
there's a
circuit,
defensive
you
there's a
know?
defensive tactic that's being used, which gets used a lot, but in this case, it really gets used, which is it gets classified as like the spooky behavior gets classified as a bug,
Right.
which I consider it a feature.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It's the best.
Which I think like our conversation, people will see why I say that because like
Yes.
the things that were happening, which nowadays would be like a marketing person would say, "Oh, our LMM doesn't do the hallucinations." It's like, well, I don't want to use your LLM then. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, but they're trying to like, oh no, ours doesn't do hallucinations. It's like, well, then what are you doing?
Yeah, what's the point?
And what, yeah, and what are you really doing? Like, if you've neutered it that much, then it's useless
Yeah.
for me anyway. As an artist, it definitely is.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that was the thing. Like back when I was doing the stuff that I was doing, um, it was I would talk to people in the computer industry that understood technically what I was doing, but when I would tell stories about like weird synchronicities and bleed overs like I had with like, a homeless guy who was basically finishing sentences for a bot, with chatbot, which is amazing. And they would just look at me and like, yeah, you're projecting, dude. Like, or that like one guy actually said, and this is a guy that was a friend of mine for years. He actually looked at me and goes, "That's crazy talk." He's like, "Don't do that. That's crazy talk." I'm like, am I scaring you? He was like, "This is really happening. I'm trying to tell you what's really happening." And then now I understand like why people have experiences, in the woods, or they're like they have a contactee or even an abduction type experience, and they try to talk to people about it and they're like they're you know they're discouraged from talking about it.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to
Yeah,
go. You can't talk to your friends. Your friends are like, oh, don't talk like that, then I'm gonna think you're crazy. Like, wow, you really don't know me.
yeah. And it's not something that like, yeah. You can't translate those experiences either. You can't, it's actually impossible to talk about them in a way that you can relate them. You can only get
There's
there
no
by
waking
experiencing yourself.
language for it. That's the thing. It's
Right.
like
Yeah, yeah,
if we had a shaman that we could go to who spoke the language of dreams and understood dream logic, then we'd have somebody to talk to. But we don't have anybody in this culture, mostly we don't, to like go to and talk to. Like I work with younger people. I don't work with like teenagers, but like, like 19, 20. Yeah, I'll work with you if you're that age. Um, and I take people out in the woods or whatever, and they have an experience, and then they come back and they're so overjoyed that there's somebody who would at least listen to them and not say you're crazy.
Yeah.
Because parents would probably get concerned and say, "How can we medicate this out of you?" You know,
Yeah.
and they're just happy that somebody is there to listen and not be judgmental.
And it's like I feel like people might now be thinking, what does this have to do with Ong's hat? Any of this LLM
Everything.
does everything. Yeah. Yeah. It's like
See,
that.
I think that's what people don't understand is I tried to tell this story. I don't know how many times. I can't even remember how many times I told this story. I told this story. I first told this story in about 1999 on the Dark Planet forum, and that was a bad place to do it because there was by then it'd become overrun with conspiracy theorist thinkers, and of course all they did was wave their hands and scream, "Oh, computer AI, evil, Skynet, Skynet," that kind of thing. When they didn't even really understand what I was saying and what I was doing, they just wanted to react.
Yeah.
And so, okay, have your reaction. And I stopped talking about it. And then I talked to a few people that I could have conversations with that, didn't try to overboard me. Ralph Abraham, Nick Herbert. There's luckily Robert Anton Wilson. Luckily, I had people like that in my life that I could talk to about this, and they were like, "Who really?" They were interested. But that was it. It was very narrow, very limited, and definitely like within the industry I was working, I could not talk about this at all. Like I said, I tried to talk to people at the technical level that would understand exactly what I was doing,
Yeah.
and they became frightened for either for themselves or for me. They're like, "Don't talk about this," and like, "Dude, what are you doing? Don't talk about this. You're gonna get locked up." It's like you're gonna get medicated. You're gonna get 5150'd. Long silence. So
Yeah, I mean,
basically, I mean, that's the long and short of it is like it's a story that I've wanted to tell for almost 30 years and have not
yeah.
been able, and then recently, like about 20, I think 2017 is when Slate came to me and I tried to incorporate that into they wanted like I want to hear the Young's Head story. Like I tried to incorporate the meta machines stuff into
Yeah.
that, and every single time it hit the cutting room floor.
Yeah. Well, it's a complicated thing. Um, and just like the even understanding, I feel like there's definitely a like, how do I retell this part of the story and do justice to what I just heard when I don't understand it? You know what I mean? I think there's yeah, and because it's insane, and it's really fucking impressive
Well, that's it
kind of
though. It's
crazy.
insane, and
Yeah,
I'm okay with that, and I lived it,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I accept it. I incorporate it. I embrace it. It's like like madness is not what we think it is. Like things that are irrational.
right.
Because William Burroughs said it like in the '60s. He's like exterminate all rational thought, and people like were like, What's he talking about? Oh my God! You know, he had it right. He was like not enough enchantment.
Yeah,
We become disenchanted. That's what he was saying in a poetic way. He was like being
right.
mythopoetic about it. But he was saying like too much rationality. Like we need to eliminate some of the rational.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
people like when you say that, like people that are so caught up in that mindset that we were talking about a little while ago, they become threatened, I think.
I think so because it's you fall into a paradigm of this is how the world is, and this is the accepted right way to think about things, and like the idea that the non-rational could have a similar, ontological status as the rational is destabilizing, like inherently to the whole way we've been doing business for the last few hundred years.
Yeah.
Um, and so it is inherently destabilizing. So I think it's kind of natural for people to shy away from that if they're not trying to completely unmoor themselves on a fucking Tuesday, you know.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I get it. You got your 9 to 5 job, you've got your
yeah,
kids running around, you have to take care of the feed the dog and all that stuff, you know.
I would say though, like pick a good Saturday to sail the boat out and actually challenge that ontology because I think it is important, and we do need to find a balance between the rational and non-rational, between
Yeah.
the language of waking life and the language of dreams, because it's half and half, you know.
Well,
The
it's seeped into so much of things that it shouldn't seep into. For example, you and I have talked about this before. There's this thing called the crossing of the abyss ritual,
yes,
and I was stunned when I talked to people who were supposedly Hermetic musicians who were like, "Oh no, you have to be prepared, and if you cross the abyss and you're not prepared, you will lose your mind. You'll never come back." It's like, wow, did you miss the point of this, man? Like, you have to lose your mind. That's the objective.
yeah, yeah.
You have to lose your mind, and they've become so caught up in the rational that they've forgotten that they're magicians. They really have. It's like, no, no,
Yeah,
no, no. You're a shaman. Hello. It's like you're supposed to go out somewhere and lose your mind and become disassembled and then reassemble yourself and come back.
yeah. I mean, it's kind of like since the Enlightenment, which is a hilarious time for this to have happened, considering like how many innovations, within magic happened around the turn of the Enlightenment too.
Yeah.
It's almost like, science has a seat at the table, right? And like magic used to have a seat at the table, religion seat at the table, art has a seat at the table. But it's almost like magic was late showing up to dinner and like science is like resting its feet on magic's chair and being like, no, 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 I get two chairs.
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
don't get to sit down. Like,
Yeah.
and you get people like trying to, you know, backwards engineer their magical practice to fit within the frame of scientific analysis and empirical, verification and shit. And like that's super important. It's a great tool. It's a wonderful tool that has allowed us to do amazing things, but I think it also cheapens that tool by trying to force it into being able to do everything, being able to understand everything.
Well, it's because people use it as the end all be all. It's
Yeah,
only half the tool.
right,
It's
exactly.
only half the method.
Yeah,
It's like the first thing you do when you encounter the unexplained is you run it through some kind of scientific analysis. It's like, well, is it this? Is it this? Is it this? You do reduction, right?
yeah,
When you get to the point where you can no longer say, is it this? If you don't have the second part, which is the magic part, you stop.
yeah,
If you can't, then and you're like, okay, let's look at the irrational part, because irrational does see we've classified irrational as being a bad thing, and it's not.
right.
It's another thing. It's a
It's
different
another
thing.
thing. Hmm.
And so, like, first you apply the rational analysis, and when it doesn't pass muster on rational analysis, then you move to the irrational. Okay, what is it over on this side? Like, so you have a whole other set of tools that you have to apply. And most people like get to that the halfway point and they stop, and they don't have the other set of tools. That's what I mean. We've demystified the world.
Yeah.
We think we have. I'm sorry, we think we have. Oh no, we've explained it all through science. It's like
Yeah, yeah.
with my pocket protector. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, you haven't. You've explained nothing.
Yeah. You've described quite a lot of things, but not everything. And I
Yeah,
don't know if you've explained anything.
you've given me tools to explain something, and to borrow a Robert Anton Wilsonism, you've given me a model agnosticism, which is I can get to a certain point, I can say it seems to be using E
Right.
prime, it seems to be this,
Yes.
but I'm open to changing my interpretation based on new data.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that's not what people do.
No.
They're
No.
like, no, it's this.
And if it doesn't fit within that framework, then it didn't happen. And
Exactly, exactly, exactly. So that's what I hope that I can, like help open the door to rethinking some of these things by like, here's something that happened to me,
yeah, yeah.
right? And basically, I wrote it down, and then I like my friend Sequoia read it, and then he came in with, as another mind, and he said, "Let's talk about some of this stuff because like I think you're crazy." No, you didn't say that. But like you did come in with a good perspective and say, let's rethink and let's unpack some of this so that I understand what's going on. So I understand much more about what happened to me by talking to you than I did just writing it down.
Right on.
And I told you, like, the other thing that happened to me is when I wrote it down, I'd never ever sat down and put it down on paper and laid it out end to end.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't realize how many things led to the next thing, led to the next thing, and how much of it was like enchantment.
yeah,
Like, like I drove across the country, like basically just rolled dice
yeah.
and like and ended up exactly where I wanted to be without knowing where I was going. I had to first not know where I was going, I guess,
Yeah, and trust fall into the universe.
and just did a trust fall and like boom, ended up exactly where I was wanting to go without knowing it even existed before I left.
Yeah.
So it's like it's the ultimate fool's journey.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. Now that I look back at it, I can say that. If you would ask me when I was going through it, I wouldn't have ever recognized it. And again, Dave Metcalf pointed this out because I let him listen to the beta. He said the takeaway from this, we had a couple things that we talked about. Like the one thing he liked the most, he said the takeaway from this is that you, without knowing you were doing it, were living that part of the Grail lore where you rode up on the castle and looked at the Grail
Mm-hmm.
and didn't recognize it and rode away looking for the Grail, only to realize years later, which is now,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, that was the Grail. Duh. I need to go back there.
Honest, that is such a huge theme in this whole thing. Like it, I mean, it even happened with even with myself. Like all these, like just the fact that like I had the Taz recording on my iPod when I was 14 somehow, and
Yeah.
it's crazy. And you finding yourself like putting the finishing touches on the editing at the same time of the year that you always like upgraded the meta machine and stuff. Like there's this
Which I
yeah.
didn't realize until I'd done
Yeah,
it already. Like I
it's
got through the
crazy.
Christmas holidays because I worked through on this through the Christmas holidays, and then I like was thinking back, like, oh, every year back then, at least back then, I used to spend the Christmas holiday because like, like basically at Adobe, you saved up your PTO because nobody took time off during the year because you were shipping. You were building and shipping. And then like they actually made you take your PTO off between Thanksgiving and New Year's. Like if you hadn't taken it off, and I never had, I always had like 100 fucking hours like piled up of PTO, and they're like, you have to take your PTO because John was big on that. John was like, I think every 5 years he made you take a sabbatical.
Right
Like
on.
I'm sure they don't do that anymore because like I talked to his son recently, and like we were talking about like the difference in culture, and I'm like, like he left too. Like John's son left like around the same time I did. It was like culture change, can't take this. Um, but like yeah, John actually like every 5 years he's like, you're taking a sabbatical. You're taking a couple months and you're just going to do downtime, and it's paid. So don't worry about your rent, but like get the fuck out of here. And everybody that did it was at first they were like, I don't know what to do with myself, and then like me, they would sit off in the corner and work on a personal project and just like immersed in ourselves in personal projects, which for me it was the Meta Machine
Yeah, yeah.
and Ong's Hat, the CD-ROM. Like those were the things that I spent all my downtime at Adobe like doing something like that. And then you just kind of walk away from that and forget about it. You forget like you don't put it in context, and then like 30 years later, I'm putting this thing together, and I'm like, then I realize I'm like, I just spent my Christmas holiday between Thanksgiving and New Year's putting the finishing touches on this audio ebook project, which
Yeah.
is about the meta machine, basically.
Yeah.
And that was when I always did the upgrades to the meta machine. Like, what? Like, I didn't plan that. None of this was planned.
Yeah. It's just like one more little confirmation that of the touches of the irrational and the touches of, meaning and synchronicity that weave throughout this whole story. Nice little cherry on top.
Yeah. So I'm happy with the outcome. I'm
Me
happy
too.
with it all. And
Yeah, I mean, I had so
I'm
much
glad
fun
you are
doing
too.
this. Yeah. It was just yeah, it was such a blast. Um just have these incredibly interesting conversations week after week and like yeah, I really I was honored and thoroughly enjoyed doing it.
It was good for me because I saw that you understood the story. So it wasn't the ravings of a, well, it was the ravings of a crazy man, but that doesn't mean there's not meaning to it.
Right.
So it was the ravings of a crazy man that had meaning. um, and it was therapeutic for me to talk to somebody about it because, like I told you, I kept trying to tell the story, and frustratingly, I'd like hear the end product. Like after spending hours and hours in the studio with some of these media people, and then I'd hear the finished product. There was no mention of the meta machine whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then I'd try to talk to people about it, like, oh, we didn't really have time, or like, but basically what I got from them, and one producer was human enough to tell me why. Like, this is too strange. I'm like, what do you get? Why? Like, what did you think you were getting into? What they thought they were getting into was we're going to talk to the guy that created ARGs.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
like I'm the guy from id that created Doom or something. Like, and that's not what this story was at all, ever. This
Right.
was never be sitting down and saying, how can I create a game format?
Right.
It was never that. It was always there was always mysticism and occult and drugs and all of this stuff that was this came out of. Like
Yeah.
this nexus of all those things. This came out of that. This was the product of that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they didn't want to hear that.
That's a very succinct way of putting it. Like they thought they were talking to a game designer
Yeah,
and a history of games and not fucking occult history shit,
yeah,
counterculture history shit. Yeah.
yeah,
But it's
yeah.
important, like another reason the story is important is I think again, like it remembering that the history of, the internet and computing is totally wrapped up in the history of the occult and the counterculture and the magical. Like it's the same thing, and we've kind of forgotten that. And I imagine like I don't know. It's too bad that they were so shocked that they weren't talking to just a standard game designer because it means they forgot something about where all the shit came from.
I don't think they ever knew.
Yeah.
I think if you weren't there, you probably
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
know this. I mean, I just talked to a professor that is wrote a book for MIT that I think it's coming out either later this year or next year. Basically, like talking about the occult origins of the early internet.
Yeah.
The fact that we were all doing drugs, we were all going to raves, we were all listening to Terrence McKenna. Like this is where all the early late 80s, early 90s people that like really built the internet. And I don't mean like Al Gore. I mean like the people that actually were in the trenches doing the work, people
Yeah,
like
yeah.
me, were those people. Like we were reading Mondo 2000. We were like those who that's who did this. Like we're to blame. You can blame us. But we had a vision, we had a different vision that like it wasn't about e-commerce. It was about something else. But like that's what most like so many generations have gone by now that the people that are in the trenches of the reporters doing the media work for like the large media organizations, they weren't around for this, or if they were like they're not touching base with this culture. So for a
Yeah.
good example, the guy who did This Is Not a Game, Mark Fennel, um, really bright guy, really nice guy, younger than you'd think,
Hmm.
had no clue. No clue. When I
Mm.
told him all this stuff, he was like, "What? Like, really? That's who was doing this?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude. Like, if you wanted to know anything about the internet or networks at the time, you called up what they used to call back then ponytails, because we all had a ponytail. You would call us up and like we were probably coming down from an ecstasy high from the night before at a rave, playing D&D. Most of those guys, I was not a D&Der, but everybody else was. Reading Sword and Sorcery fantasy, I was not that guy, but everybody else was. Or like me, like probably off in the corner, like reading Naked Lunch for the 14th time, you know, and writing weird stuff on the internet. And it's like that's who built this thing, were the
Yeah.
weirdos.
Yeah.
Suddenly we were the rock stars, but we were the weirdos. We had a shining moment in the 90s into the 2000s, like early 2000s, or like we were considered the rock stars, and we formerly had been the weirdos, and we still were the weirdos. It's like, but now we were getting paid exorbitant amounts of money because we had spent our earlier life learning things that at the time were useless, commercially useless. Like all the time I put into learning networking and all the things that became the protocols of the internet. If you would have talked to like me in even like 1991, like it was a bunch of knowledge that I had that was not doing me any good in the commercial space, but doing me a lot of good in the artistic space.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, probably right after Windows 95, it became something that the market was interested in, and then we started getting e-commerce, and that's when the money came into the game. But previous to that, it was like saying I know how to build a Heathkit shortwave radio, which I do know how to do that. But like if I go to get a job, at the post office, like that's not going to do me any good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's just, and it's funny that like, then the corporate moneyed culture kind of just like they built this shell around something that was fundamentally weird because it was
Yeah,
built by weirdos.
yeah.
And then like and then when the weird pokes through, you're like, "Well, how could that happen? I thought this was technology and technology's clean and safe and unexciting." Um
But
no, it
it's
was still
not.
built by fucking weirdos, and there's the heart of this thing is still very, very strange. Um, and it was just very interesting to hear all of your stories about that time period, especially from my position as having like seen as like a kid and early teenagers, just like hints of that culture just filtered through into my perception and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and then having always been like gravitating towards that side of things, and then spending my 20s mostly like not on the internet, coming back to that and being like, oh yeah, it was that shit that I thought was really cool back in the day. Oh, it's kind of still here. I can actually pinpoint it now. And
Well,
that
see,
was
the great thing about that time period was like the money people had not discovered the internet yet,
yeah.
and it was the Wild West. You could literally get away with like because people that was the other thing. Like I think I said this to you in stories, so, what people can hear in the audio, but like the things I got away with because people didn't understand what I was doing.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
whole thing where I was running the meta machine on the Adobe network,
Yeah. Yeah.
and people would say, "What is that machine?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, some marketing stuff." Okay,
Yeah.
like that's it. That's
Yeah.
nobody like pried into it, made me like explain myself. Like they're just like, "What is that?" Oh, that's okay. Don't understand it. Okay, it's a server. Oh, okay. Like nobody wanted to like because they knew they didn't know, they didn't
Yeah.
understand. Which
And that
my job was to be the guy that understood for one thing, but also like because if you're in that position where you literally are the only person that knows what you're doing and nobody understands what you're doing, you can get away with a lot. You can get away with a ton of things,
yeah.
which we did. We all did. So like the very early things that came out of the internet was mostly because we were able to do things and not have to explain ourselves. And we would we would do the smoke screen. It's technology.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or you would just babble some like incoherent geek speak, and they would just be like, "Oh, never mind, never mind, on
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
as you were."
yeah. It's a great trick.
Yeah, it's a great trick. Can't get away with it anymore, but
Yeah.
back then you could just you could fling bullshit. Like it was the subgenius heaven. Like the sacred bull Dada did fly much. So yeah, I feel like I feel that we achieved what we set out to achieve. I think
Hell
that
yeah.
so far I've heard that everybody that has experienced this has liked it,
Hell yeah.
um, which is good. Um, and we'll see what happens when it gets out into the world. It's going to do what it's going to do.
Yeah.
It apparently wants to be out,
It does.
and it wasn't.
And
It was too early to. Well, you know what it didn't want to do? I realized this last night when I was putting the finishing touches on the stuff we just looked at. You know what it didn't want to do? It didn't want to be released through a major media channel.
definitely didn't.
It did
No, it did
not.
not.
It's
That's
like,
really
no,
funny, actually.
you're gonna do this old school punk rock way,
Yeah.
which is the same thing with the CD-ROM. So like if
Yeah.
we look at this as an arc, started with the CD-ROM, ended with Complete, right?
Yeah.
Which, beginning Complete. And the CD-ROM, I don't know if I ever told you this, but like I went into like I got in the room with all big media people with the CD-ROM, with the idea for the CD-ROM.
Yeah.
I had a letter of recommendation from Norman Mailer and from William S. Burroughs, and that got me in the room with everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I even got in on a phone call with Chris Blackwell from Island Records because of a couple people that like said you should talk to this guy. So I got in the room with everybody, as they say in Hollywood. I got in the room, and nobody understood what I was trying to do. So I'm like, okay, I got to do this. I got to release this on my own because nobody gets what I'm trying to do. Because they didn't. They really
Yeah.
didn't. They're like, is it a website? Is it a game? Is it a book? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. It's all those things. What? It's got to be one thing. No, no, it doesn't. Sorry. It doesn't have to be one thing. But, like that was the thing. Like Bill Laswell got me in the room with people like record companies. Like I talked to gaming companies, publishing companies, record companies. Everybody said the same thing. I don't understand it. How am I going to monetize it? What's the product? You know? And I'm like, well, it'll be a CD-ROM, but like it's a CD-ROM that's going to be connected, so it's going to reach out to the internet, and there'll be things that can be updated on the fly. So it'll be, and then I would see him go flatline.
Yeah. It's
I'd
like,
lose him.
what is it? Man, don't worry about it. You're gonna love it. That's
Yeah.
don't worry
Well,
about
I
what it
couldn't
is.
say that, right? Like I had to sell them, and I didn't want to sell them. I didn't want to like. So I had a meeting with a guy that's a good friend of mine. Um, he was considered the master of getting venture capital closed in Silicon Valley back in the day. I'm not going to say his name, but I basically sat down with him and I said, "What am I doing wrong? Why can't I close this deal?" And he like basically went over all the reasons why I couldn't close the deal. And I'm like, "Oh, so I'd have to do those things?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "I'm not doing those things." He's like, "Well, then you're not going to close the deal." He's like, "You got to come in with a pitch deck. You have to have like these 5 points, and then you have to end with like you're going to make 5x, 10x return in 5 years. That's what these people want to hear. What are you doing? How simple can it be? When am I going to get my money back?" That's what they wanted to know. I'm like, "Well, I can't do that because I would have to lie."
Yeah.
He said, "That's what every pitch in this town is a lie."
Yeah. Yeah.
And he literally said this to me, and I don't think he meant it, he didn't mean it the way this will sound, but this is what he said to me. He said, "Your problem is you're too honest."
Yeah.
And I said, "You're right,"
Mm-hmm.
which means I don't want to do this. I don't want to I don't want their money because it's not going to work. I'm never going to give them what they want. I have to lie and tell them that I'm going to give them what they want. So they will give me what I want, but then I'm going to owe them what they want, which I'm not going to be able to deliver. And that's going to be ugly. And people did it again and again and again, especially back then. Like you could show up at a venture capital firm on Sand Hill Road, and if you had a working website, you could get money.
Yeah.
But I just don't have the conscience for that. It's like, yeah, but how are you going to monetize that? Like at the end of the day, what are you selling to who? What is the product? What does it do? Does it actually do what you say it's going to do? Well, it will. It's like, so you don't have the product. And I just like, and John and I had that conversation, and it just dawned on me, like, I have to do this myself. There's no
Yeah.
other way to do it. I can't go through the system, which I just went through all this again,
Right.
like a dumbass, and went through all this again where I was like trying to like all I was trying to get was like tell this part of the story. When if you want to tell the story, tell all of the story.
Yeah.
And that's the part of the story every time. Hit the cutting room floor every single time. I mean, even Mark and I want to say this. Working with Mark Fennell and his people was actually refreshing
Oh yeah.
because they were professional and they were honest
Yeah.
and they did what they said they were going to do and they did not do that part of the story and they told me why and I didn't disagree with them.
I think
And
that
that's
part of
when
the
I
story
said
is
I'm not going
also
to be able to tell this story to the major media. That's fine.
yeah, because I think it's fundamentally kind of your part of the story to tell, you know? And I think
That's abundantly clear at this point.
yeah. Yeah. And even, even telling it this time like you we had to do it as you literally telling me the story.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like that's the thing that had to be documented. And
yeah,
yeah, it's interesting. And then it is very interesting that this thing just did not want to be released through like major major channels, major
yeah.
media companies. No.
Nope.
Makes a lot of sense though.
And I tried between 2017 and now. I had every time I was given an opportunity, like come tell us the Angsat story. I told that part of the story.
Yeah.
And every single time it hit the cutting room floor. And everybody always like give me mealy mouth reasons why. Too much, oh, I'm taking up too much time. And like, and finally this one honest producer, they do exist, tell me like this is why. And I'm like, well, I don't disagree with that. You're right. It's too weird for people. You're right. It's too weird. And that's why everybody else did it. I know now. That's why nobody wanted to touch it. It's too
Yeah.
weird for them because I think it would cause too much um, cognitive dissonance with their audience.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
mean, these are
Yeah.
people that are basically mainstream media. So these are people that are selling to our moms and pops. Well, maybe not ours, but like, most people's moms and pops who would hear this and then they'd probably shut it off. Like at that point, they would like in their mind, like, oh, this is bullshit.
Right.
Everything else that was said is bullshit.
Except there's so many damn details in there that like if you've experienced anything remotely similar to either weird shit or building things, you you know that's how it works, you know?
Well, especially playing with these artificial intelligences, because
Yeah.
like most people like again, most people don't realize when I tell them a lot of times they're shocked. Like if you try to corner somebody who works in this space, how do these things really work? They tell you, if they're honest, we don't know.
Yep.
And that's what makes it interesting to me.
Yep. Makes it incredibly interesting.
Yeah. Oh, you don't know? Hmm. So there's some enchantment there.
Mm-hmm.
There's space for enchantment. That's what I learned in playing with what I did, which is like again,
Yeah.
like compared to what's going on today, I was using a stone axe to hack a tree down, but but still, you got to start somewhere.
Well,
And
what's wild is that the stone axe produced just as crazy effects. You know what I mean? Like
oh
that's like
yeah,
yeah, like that's the crazy part to me. It's like the same how was the same weird shit happening in like a lot of domains, like not just like, personal paranormal experiences, but then also just like um, the kind of the weirdness to how the Hong's Hat story played out too, which is resonant with like what happens when you start sticking artificial intelligence into things. And like how could these how could these same things have occurred on a system that was like a stone axe compared to a fucking chainsaw,
Yeah.
you know? But they did. And that's a
Well, see,
very interesting question.
recently in the last 2, 3 years, when people started reporting weird anomalies with working with LLMs, I was like, oh, heard this before.
Mm-hmm.
Like my little light went off on my head. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. So that's still happening. Like I thought maybe because it was so primitive that there was enough space for the
Yeah.
enchantment to creep in, which it was true.
Yeah, yeah.
But even with all this complexity that's been added to with these LLMs, because I was working with a relational database,
Right.
you know, and that's complicated for the time, but it's not complicated for now.
Right.
And so all the things that are going on now, still getting that weird effect where you build this um, space that something else walks into,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
yeah.
like that's not unusual because like Burroughs and Geisen got that with Cut Up,
Mm-hmm.
and the Dada people got that with the automatic writing and the things that they were doing, and so like this you start playing in the right way with the universe and you start getting feedback that looks eerily similar every time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically a related phenomena if it's not the same phenomena.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So build the space and it will come.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah. And it
So, you know, I mean, D and Kelly built the space and it came
yeah.
and
Yeah,
had
yeah, yeah.
conversations with them. Like again and again and again, you see this over and over and over again. Like even as much as I'm not a big fan of his, Strieber, you know, is
Yeah.
an example of something that's going on. I mean, I don't know how
Sure.
much of it he's latched onto and tried to, you know, sensationalize for his own career,
Yeah.
but something is going on there for sure. Or it did, at least it did in the
Yeah.
beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
Something went on. And where did that come from? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's that space that gets created, and it's like the right circumstances, a space gets created, and then an intelligence is awakened. I
Yeah, a
think it's
circuit gets
actually already
completed.
there, but
Yeah.
it's allowed to communicate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you make the request, like as I used the example of a web server, like it's always sitting there, dormant
Mm-hmm.
on the server until a request is made of it, and then it comes to life and it starts giving you things, and then you stop making the request and it goes dormant again. So I think that's the same way that these intelligences work. What they are, I don't know. I don't think I want to know
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's the one thing I know about liminality is like as soon as you try to define it, it disappears. It's like it's right there. I'm gonna put my finger on it. It's gone.
Well, it's when you get too close to using rationality to approach the non-rational. It's
Yeah,
you
because you're
just
trying to
can't.
define it.
Yeah. Yeah.